Hello and welcome to At the Redline Podcast. I'm here with my good friend Brian Mack, who is a member of the church that I attend.
Born and raised in Minnesota, which is
Minnesota.
why my O's are a lot longer than yours.
Oh.
And I get made fun of by our oldest daughter every time I say an accented word.
Well, rightfully so. That's what older daughters do.
But only myself as far as blood kid of my parents. They only had one. They said apparently I can't share my toys, and so they didn't have another kid.
Oh, so you're an only child.
Technically speaking.
Technically speaking.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to say. So when we moved to Spokane, I was finishing up second grade, I think, and finished up second grade out here in Spokane. Went to a different school for third grade, but when I started fourth grade, we had just moved into this house in the Spokane Valley, and I was at the bus stop with a bunch of other kids, and I was a real small, puny kid.
Really? Smallest in your school?
Certainly could have been. Trash can size.
Yeah, I was the smallest kid in my school. Well, there was one kid smaller than me, but yeah, I was the smallest kid in high school.
In the high school too. Yeah.
Junior and
yeah, I was a pretty puny kid. Yeah, I got picked
100
on.
pounds in senior.
I don't even think I made 100 pounds. I might have.
Well, you beat me.
I had a bunch of stuff in my pockets, maybe. But no, I met a friend of mine. Her name was Kelly, and she lived down the road. Became fast friends, and we sort of adopted each other into each other's families.
Oh, nice.
So even today, when we refer to each other, or if we're maybe introducing the other to someone else, it's my brother or sister.
Oh, cool. How cool is that?
So it's that's been a neat relationship.
Oh my goodness. I wish we could have even imagined such a thing.
But when my oldest cousin, who was also sort of like a sister of mine, had moved back to Minnesota and lived with her in proximity to her mom and my dad's mom, who is probably the most intense prayer warrior I've ever met. Her life changed dramatically within that influence. And when I would speak to her on the phone and hear just such a change in her countenance, such a change in her spiritually, that did something to me. And so I've said this to her a lot before, that when I look back on my walk with Christ now, it really began at that point. And so I resumed going to church, but this time of my own volition, and started to get more involved in things.
I'm really curious, and only because I'm sort of curious about things. Can you language a little bit what was different over the phone with your cousin? You sounded like it was something in the tone of voice, but there must have been something sort of magical that you were experiencing.
She was talking, and to really understand that, you'd have to understand that that her and her younger brother and myself were all about a year apart, and we were all thick as thieves, and we got into a lot of trouble together. So the way that our lives were prior to Heather and then later Mike moving back to Minnesota, the way that our lives were as a trio out here was pure trouble, pure rebellion. I don't give a bleep about any of the stuff that's going on at church. But when I would speak to her on the phone later on, and she would talk to me about what Jesus was doing in her life, my thought I can remember was, are you really going to talk to me about that? Is that seriously? Because I at first it's not believable. You're speaking to me about something that I can remember us laughing at together out here, and now now it's, let me tell you about what Jesus.
Hilarious.
It's the boldness of that. It's the authenticity of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a complete 180 of the character of her that I knew out here.
Yeah.
and it's almost like I was listening to grandma
Oh,
on
that's
the
so
phone.
cool.
And it was, you know, it wasn't fake, and so you can see something and you go, wow, that's legit. I have to learn a little bit more about that. At River City, I'm the administrator, and so that's just handling all of the bookkeeping, a lot of the back end stuff that is done at the church, dealing with
God
the
bless
different.
you. Thank you very much.
It's a really fun job, but
It's really
dealing
fun.
with
He's
all of our
joking. It's
vendors
not
and
fun. Just
um,
weird. That's what's going
it
on.
well, I what's and this will examine a bit later, I'm sure too, but it's ironic to me and fun and funny whenever I consider how God prepares us for different things in life.
I really do appreciate your work. I'm not kidding when I say God bless you, but I don't want to talk about it. You also are responsible a little bit for front of house, greeters and security and stuff like that. I don't know how you guys have divided that up, but talk to me a little bit about. I really want to give you an opportunity to talk about the security aspect of church and just sort of highlight it a little bit and anything else that you are responsible for at River City.
Well, the security part, absolutely. The front of the house stuff, the ushers and greeters, Rick handles that.
Oh, shout out
That's
to
his
Rick
bag,
Fielding.
and does a great job with that. Which includes now helping with organizing volunteers to bring some wheelchair bound folks over from the
Oh,
adult care
that's right.
center next door.
Yeah,
We usually have about half a dozen of them coming over every Sunday, which is awesome.
yeah.
But the security piece, we operate in an area of town that has a lot of folks that are homeless, and folks that are maybe just living in the neighborhood, but also drug addicts or otherwise hooked on something that's not God or phonics. Uh,
Okay.
so making sure that we have a space where people can come and worship, people can come and reload, which is how I ironically how I see church is that's your opportunity to reload. You're out of ammo, so you go in and reload, and you go
Oh, I
back out
think
into
that's a
ministry.
failed strategy for good theology, but we could talk about that sometime. I think it ought to be a place of celebration that is beyond the necessity of reloading. That Christians ought to be reloading every morning and every day and all day long, and that the community as it gathers is rather a celebration of all the people that are presently loaded and locked and ready. That's my theory in short. And you can feel free to disagree, but in
Well, we
short
can all
form.
we can all have our different things that we like to imagine church as, and what we get out of it when we go. When I go to church, it is my opportunity to get re-equipped, to continue to be equipped to go out to the actual ministry, which is beyond those walls. Especially speaking with driving for rideshare, which has become sort of a mobile ministry, and it's I might have gotten something from church. Maybe it was part of the word. Maybe it was from worship. Maybe it was from conversation from someone else. Who knows? But it's something that now I'm going to use while I am out and about looking for those God appointments.
Okay. Um, okay, so one of the reasons I really wanted to get you in, and we had a little conversation about this, is my feeling as a former pastor is that many of us that are behind a pulpit end up with a message, with something that's sort of burning a hole in us. We can't wait to get out there. But as we're preparing it, we realize that there's really a bigger audience than our own family or congregation or small group or whatever. And I want to give pastors an opportunity and people like yourself that have a message for a larger audience. Is there a message burning in you that you want to share And would you share it? And then we'll kind of dialogue. I'll interrupt you whenever I want.
That God plays the long game in our lives. And to unpack that, I would say that what I'm doing currently, so just real quickly, the position that we already discussed within the church, going through the licensing process now to become a pastor, doing some kind of a mobile ministry now, looking to join the Spokane Police Department chaplaincy, going through that process. So
Nice.
all of those things.
Well, let me just stop you for a minute because I don't know how much you're going to talk about chaplaincy, but I was a Spokane police chaplain for about 8 years. And it's just such good ministry. And shout out to what's and all the chaplains for the Spokane Police Department. It's just great ministry. And both for the department and for the city, I think it's just legitimate ministry. And I really appreciate that.
Mickey and I and Kevin had a really great discussion around that. So I look forward to that process. But all of those things, just from a vocational standpoint, are aimed at serving Jesus. All of those, and that's so completely different to many of the years of my life prior. But when I say, God plays the long game, when I was at the end of high school going into college, I was dead certain that God was calling me to be a police officer. Dead certain. And so I went through some neat training at the end of high school, then spent a few years in college getting my criminal justice degree, going through that training, working at Sears at the same time just to, as a job. But the goal was be a police officer. And when I finally applied for a few different departments, made it very far through the process, didn't get hired. And it left me confused. Have you ever been confused when you could have sworn you were doing something that God was calling you to do, but then it doesn't materialize?
Yeah.
And that left me in a state of confusion. I had no idea why I just spent all this money,
Yeah.
on this education, which we paid off and not got forgiven. But anyway,
I do want to stop you here. How disturbing it is when things don't go the way we expect them to go, and how it can really be troubling. People are thrown off their game for decades because things don't work out, the way that they had hoped or the way that they had thought. And I know that even in my own journey, when we closed the church, there was a sense of failure, like I missed the mark, even though it was great. Where was God? I mean, all these questions had to be sort of
Yeah.
facilitated and asked because it just felt like life was kind of a disaster zone.
Yeah.
And a lot of people experience this. That's why I think this message is actually important, is that so many of the times we get to the end of a road, it's not the end of our lives. I remember many times God saying, I'm not done with you, but the church is done.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to be totally honest, that was very difficult for me to get. Like, I couldn't really understand that because in kind of where I come from, once you start a ministry, once you start a journey in ministry, you don't ever quit. And it was very difficult. So anyway, I totally cut you off. You were talking about God is in the long game, and you went through training and to be a cop, and then
then nothing. And it was,
well, not nothing. I mean, you got married and had kids
for now. But the as far as trying to follow and be obedient, and then what you could have sworn was your path doesn't end up materializing. That can cause a lot of confusion. Now you have a decision to make. Do I take this and go, well, I guess I've been making mistakes. I guess I made a big mistake in what I believed. Or do you trust that God has your life in his hands? And I trusted the latter. You know, God's got my life in his hands. Apparently this was not, I'm not going to understand it right now, but I'm going to have faith that God is the one that's in control and not me. And
when did you come to that? I mean, in your journey, did you come to that while you were still, at Sears, or did you?
As far as that mindset,
Yeah, I mean,
so that whenever I applied for a job, which was could have been within the Sears network, different promotion or what have you, or even applying to be a police officer, the first thing that I would always do is pray and give it to God first, saying that, hey, I've got this opportunity.
Wait a minute, just out of curiosity, when you were 18 years old and coming out of high school and planning to be a cop, you were a Christian at that time.
Oh yeah,
you were practicing Christian. Wow, you've been a Christian. Not as long as me because I'm old, but
well, remember, around 12ish is when my actual walk with Christ, I would say, began.
How old are you?
39.
Gosh, you're a pup.
That God works out of time, and so all throughout our lives, our linear life, my 39 years now, he's been planting different skills and different passions all along the way, and moving pieces, so to speak, along the board. And the skills I was picking up at that company, like I mentioned earlier, are really what is serving me now as far as the position I'm holding at the church on staff. But then probably the most oddest call in my life to date was when my wife Sarah, I think yourself and a few others were starting to say, I think you ought to think about being a pastor. And the joke, which you've heard, is that was on my list of least likely career choices, just underneath basketball coach. So to hear that, and my initial reaction being, you're nuts, right? Like you should go and see a doctor. Turned into, all right, well, I'm gonna.
Well, let me just stop you for 1 second, because there's a couple things that come to mind quickly. One is you're a natural leader. Two is you got a good voice. Like, you got it like a radio voice. And three
it's a good thing that my hearing runs on batteries, because I don't like to hear it.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing is that you have good presence up front. Anytime that you do intros at church, you are very, very, you're comfortable in your skin up front, and you have a good presence. You have natural gifting when it comes to upfront ministry. There's no question.
Oh, appreciate that feedback. Yeah. Thank you. At the time of first hearing people saying that, it was so foreign to me.
Huh.
I had done facilitating and teaching and coaching and training for years, and was perfectly fine with being in front of a group of people, speaking, training, you name it. But the thought of using those skills for ministry was odd to me at the time. And it's, yeah, so
that's partly the fault of the church. Honestly, I think everybody should be comfortable with the idea that you're called to ministry.
We're all missionaries.
We all have ministry. It's just finding out which one it is. And one of the things that the professional church has done is made us feel often, and the mega church is probably the most egregious, even though I don't blame them. I mean, my roots are mega, but I mean, one of the things that always comes out is people feeling like they're not good enough to be used in ministry, and they're sitting and watching and not really participating in the work when there's so much work to do. But anyway,
yeah,
that's not your fault, Brian.
I don't disagree. Feeling that thought that that we are all called to be active participants in kingdom building is not something that I think that everybody contemplates.
Yeah, for sure. I think most in the evangelical world agree with it in concept, but how to work it out in life often it eludes us. I think, unless you're like me and you just kind of like to talk.
Well, I mean, where's the, if we were to look at where's the long game at right now, the the ministry thing is certainly something that I think planting seeds of training and facilitating and being involved with people has led partly to this, but the the biggest thing that's actually made me go back and think, okay, we really are playing a long game here is the chaplaincy piece. You and I first spoke about that, and you knew that I had some law enforcement background as far as at least the training piece and going through that process, but knowing that the department desires chaplains to have some background, some procedural knowledge, or working knowledge or so of police procedure. And when I was first hearing that discussion, um, unlike when I was told, "Hey, you ought to be a pastor," and my first thought was laughter. Um, when I hear this, and then my first thought is instantly, and it really was instant when we were talking about this. It was, oh my gosh, I'm I'm feeling like,
I was the
like I'm
first
making
one
a
to
connection to
I was the first one to talk to you about chaplaincy,
chaplaincy.
in
Yeah,
the police department.
yeah. Outside the church when we were just chatting.
Nice.
But yeah, my thought was, okay, I'm making a connection here to what's happened prior, because where I feel that my life is now, and again, God can radically change this at an instant. Maybe I'm wrong, but where it certainly feels like now, and I spent a lot of time in prayer about this, is like I do with every job opportunity or other kind of opportunity, is that 20 years ago, um, God placed into my heart these desires to join a police department, be a police officer, go through all of this training, gaining all of this knowledge. And during the latter years, the more recent years, um, preparing me for some kind of ministry. And then now today with connecting all of those pieces into police ministry and community ministry that it's involved with that chaplaincy program. And so that long game to me really says, look, you might be going through something in your life right now where God's preparing you for something 30 years from today.
Oh.
And so we have this desire to have instant gratification with things. And if something doesn't pan out, we, like I said earlier, we have that opportunity to either be conflicted and say, okay, that obviously what I believe was wrong, or we have an opportunity to say, okay, well, I'm going to believe instead that God has this in His hands, and that this will come to fruition at some point.
Yeah.
And it really has. Sometimes we get to have that peek behind the curtain and see a bit of God's design, see a small bit of His handiwork, His signature on something.
Yeah.
And it's pretty incredible when we're blessed to see that.
It's super incredible when we're blessed to see that before it happens. I mean, last night we were talking about visions, and I
Yeah.
remember before we planted the church, I just had this idea of a church that was in the inner city, right? It was in Spokane. It wasn't in the outsides. Is down in East Central or West Central or South Central Spokane. This idea that there would be a church made for the neighborhood, and it's cool to be able to peek into the future. We all think that we can do it as a natural thing, but it's pretty rare and very mysterious, and generally not in our control.
Yeah.
There's got to be a website. I don't know what it is.
RiverCityFoursquareChurch.com.
Okay. And
And
the
all
phone
of our
number if
contacts
someone
are
wants to
there.
contact the church directly.
The really the best way is to either email us or call 509-994-3528. That gets right to me. And the church's email is rivercityfsc.com, franksamcharles.com.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm excited to do the work and get it all edited out. We'll see each other on Sunday.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm excited about it. That's all for today. Alec at Coaching the Redline. You can find me on the internet, or you can call me 509-999-3305. Like I said before, I'm a coach and a spiritual director for pastors. Maybe you know someone who's a pastor who maybe could benefit from a life coach or a spiritual director. If you want to know more about that, you can see some of my other videos, and we'll talk later. Thanks for watching.